Hi everyone, my name is Phil and welcome to Phil Does 3D. I'm a multimedia and 3D artist and I stream on Twitch weekdays from 5 PM Pacific time in the United States, 11 AM in Australia and 1 AM in the UK. Just a reminder for you guys in the UK, you've started daylight savings now, so the start time is back to 1 AM for you guys. Never changes if you're in the US though, it's always 5 PM Pacific time because I work on US time. Good evening Sniper Echo, good to see you. Thanks for hopping into chat and saying hi. I just want to shout out a thank you again to Nano, Lemonius and Omen for following my Twitch channel. I do appreciate it when you guys follow me on Twitch, so thank you very much guys. So let's get to it. We've been working on an Art Deco building, interior and exterior in 3D Studio Max, texturing up the assets at the moment in Substance Painter. I will probably be using Mari to do some texturing at some stage as well on some of the assets. A bit of a background again for anyone new to the channel that wants to know what I'm working on. I created an Art Deco building fly-through in UDK in 2011. I'm recreating that now in the Unreal Engine version 4.15.1. At the moment we're working on our assets. I want to update them for the new engine just to change some of the textures, make some of the assets a little higher polygon because graphics cards have gotten a lot better these days, so we can afford to up the texture sizes and up the poly counts. This is the building that we're going to be taking into Unreal, but before we do that I'm working on the assets, and what I've done is I've laid all of my assets out for the interior of the building in a row. That way we'll be sure not to forget anything, and as we work on an asset then we import it into the Unreal Engine so that by the time we get to all of our assets done, we've got everything ready that we can start rebuilding it in Unreal. You go and grab that copy, Sniper Echo. I've got mine ready here. Well, this one. You know I'll be grabbing another one later on. So yeah, at the moment we're just bringing them in one by one, and then we'll have everything ready to go to rebuild our Art Deco building in Unreal Engine 4. So let's jump back into Max. Yesterday we were working on this railing. Now again, let's just jump quickly into the video that I created back in 2011 for this building. I'm just going to jump through the beginning because the beginning is concept art. Alright, so this was the UDK version that I created back in 2011. We're going to recreate this in the new version of the engine because I want to see what the changes that have been made to the lighting in the new Unreal Engine. And we're going to be updating the assets as well as redoing some of the textures. And at the moment we're working on, I'm just going to wait for it to fly through, we're working on this railing that sits between the upper level and the lower level. So that's what we're going to be working on today. We're finishing off today. We've been doing work on that for the last couple of days, but we should finish that today and bring it into the Unreal Engine. So we'll do that now. So yesterday we were texturing up part of one of these assets. I'm just going to select these and go into isolation mode, so it's just easier for me to work on without the rest of my assets in the way. So if I go Tools and Isolate Selection, that'll make our life much easier. I'm also just going to make sure it's in all my 3 viewports. Alright. So yesterday we were texturing this up. We've just got a few more things left to do to finish this part of the asset or the prop, whatever you want to call it, before we bring it into Unreal. So we textured that up yesterday. We're going to work on, I think, these railing pieces. I want to make them higher poly. They're just a flat plane at the moment, and that was good enough for UDK back in 2011, but I think if we just add a bit more geometry to the actual asset, it'll catch the light better and look nicer in the engine. And like I said, we can afford to go a bit higher poly now, so we'll do that. And I also want to remove this texture from inside of these columns. Like I will leave the decorative woodwork on the outside, but I want to remove it from the inside. It looks odd. Having this railing butting up against that decorative work like that just doesn't look right. So we're going to fix that up too. But let's start with these railing pieces, I think. So I'm going to select the model, jump into my Modify tab. And remember guys, if you have any questions for me, please feel free to pop into chat and ask me. I am a architectural visualization artist at the moment. I've worked for game studios in the past, and I've also done some film and cinema work for different studios. So if you have a question regarding 3D, it doesn't have to be about 3D Studio Max. It can be about anything. Please pop into chat and ask me. I don't know everything, but if I can help, I'm quite happy to. I'm quite willing to try. If you want to pop into chat and say hello, that's always cool. If you just want to watch, that's completely fine. So let's go into sub-object mode here and select these railing pieces so that I can separate them from the mesh and it'll make my life easier to work on them. Now these gaps that you see here, wrought iron decorative pieces are going in there. We'll do that. I'll show you that when we jump into Unreal, because we'll rebuild the part of this model in Unreal using a blueprint. Well, when I say using a blueprint, we're going to assemble it in the editor, and then we'll convert that to a blueprint. And that'll make it easy for us when we come to actually create the interior of the building to select it and place it, as opposed to having to do it by hand on individual pieces when we're actually building our building. So we have those selected. I'm just going to detach them. Go out of sub-object mode. I'm going to select them, and I'm also going to go into isolation again so we can just see those pieces. Alright. Now, I'm going to increase the poly count on one, and then I'm going to duplicate that around for all the others. So that saves me. I don't want to do the same thing on all of the pieces if I can avoid it. So again, I'm going to select that object, go into sub-object mode. I'm just going to detach one of these pieces. And again, we're going to select that and isolate it further. So now we've only got one piece that we need to worry about working on. Let's jump into our front viewport here, I think. And we'll zoom in a bit. Now, you see my axes is off. That doesn't really matter, but just for me working, I'm going to move my axis to my object. And if you're a Max user, you just go into your hierarchy tab, select pivot and effect pivot only and send it to object. Alright. And all we need to do to increase the poly count on this, again, this is a flat box or rectangular box, which, like I said, was fine when we made it for UDK, but we can make it a bit higher poly, and it's not going to need a lot of work to make it higher polygon. What we're going to do is we're going to go into our creation tab here. We'll start by adding a box, and we're going to add one here. Now I'm going to jump out of the front viewport because my object is not at 0, 0 position, but Max, whenever it creates a object, it places it at 0, 0, 0. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to move our box rectangle we just created in front of our plane here. I'm just zooming out to find out where it's placed at. Okay. I'm just going to pull that forward, and that'll just make it easier for us to see in the viewport here what we're doing. I also want to check on the height of that. Oh. That height's probably not too bad. Actually, it should work quite okay. Alright, let's jump back into our front viewport again. And I'm going to hold down the shift key and shift drag a copy over. Make sure it's a copy and not an instance. I'm going to shift drag again and place one here in the center. And what I'm basically doing is I'm copying the texture that's in the background. Because again, that texture is just on a flat plane and I want to add, make it a bit more three-dimensional. Now I'm going to shift drag add another copy here. I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees. Jump into my modify tab. I'm going to pull back on the width here, or the length as Max calls it. We'll move it up and over. And again, I'm just going to zoom in a bit. I'm going to pull it back on the length again. Maybe make it a little bit longer. I want to make sure it intersects both sides of that, of those rectangles on either side. Now again, I'm going to hold down the shift key and shift drag a copy over. Again, I'm just going to make sure it's a little bit, the length is increased just a little. And shift drag a copy down. And shift drag a copy of this one down. Now I'm going to actually reduce the width here a little. Again, to better match the texture that's in the background. I'm going to copy that width value onto this one. And probably also these two I think are a little bit wide. Let's pull out and select the 4 of those copies we just made and shift drag a copy down to the bottom. Alright, now I'm going to jump back into my 3D orthographic viewport here. Just to make sure that they all look like they're lined up correctly. And that looks fine. Alright, let's jump into our material editor. Just give Max a minute. I want to find the material that we're using for that, those banister railings. It's this one right here. We view the image, we can see exactly what it is. It's quite a small texture. It's a small object in relation to the rest of the model. So we don't have to go huge with our texture size. You could if you wanted to, but I wouldn't, you know, no point in wasting memory on large textures that aren't required. I'm going to select this first rectangle. I'm going to apply that texture to it. In fact, I'm going to select them all and apply the texture. Now, I just want to point out to you guys, the way I show you my workflow is my workflow. I'm not suggesting this is the best workflow, the only workflow. Good to see you, Sniper Echo. It's just the one that I use, and it's worked for me over the years. And again, I've worked in 3D for more than 10 years, so I found this, the way I show you here is generally the best way to tackle something like this. I'm going to select that first rectangle there. I'm going to throw down an unwrap UVW. And we'll open up the UV editor. We'll just pull it in a bit so we can see both the model and the editor at the same time. I'm going to make sure my music thing there isn't in the way of anything important. My music overlay. Okay, now I'm going to select everything here. I'm going to do, we'll try with a flatten mapping to begin with. And that should work for us. I am going to make sure I can see my texture though in the background. Alright. I'm going to rotate my UVs here 90 degrees. I'm going to move them out of the UV space just for a minute. I'm going to select that front edge there. And we're going to non-uniformly scale this, and you do that just by holding down the Shift key and dragging in either in the X or the Y. And again, with the move tool, if you hold down the Shift key and max, you can constrain it to one direction instead of it moving all over the place on you. I'm just making sure that my UVs are actually within the 0 to 1. I don't want them outside of that 0-1 space. That should be good. I'm just going to move it over just a little bit. Now I just want to ensure that our UVs are running the correct way, because Max has a habit when you do its flatten mapping of making the UVs incorrect, like flatten mapping in the wrong direction. And it may have done it here as well. Actually, what it looks to me like is Max has our UVs flipped. Those two objects there look like this part of the texture here. So let's select that UV shell and go into our tools. We're going to flip it vertically, and we're going to flip it horizontally, and that better matches the texture that we're aligning it to here. So basically Max had it flipped upside down and back to front. Just something to be aware of. If you're using Max's UVW editor, it can do that, particularly if you're using their flatten mapping. Okay, now this is the back of that object, and the back of that object we are never going to see because it's resting right up against the back of the railing here, so we don't really have to worry about making sure that's placed correctly. So what I'm going to do with that is I'm just going to shrink it down, and I'm going to pop it down in here. It doesn't matter, like I said, we're never going to see it. Now we will see the size of this object though, so let's select those, and we're just going to do the same thing. We're going to use the same color part of the texture so that they'll blend together correctly. Again, I'm holding down the Shift key and I'm scaling up to scale in one direction only. And that should be good. Let's move the second one in. What I'm doing here is I'm just going through my ID. I know it's probably hard to see. I'm going to pull this over a bit so that my music overlay isn't in the way. There's an option here in Max's UVW editor to choose an ID, and this allows you to, if you have different IDs assigned, to select just that part of the UV shell. So in this instance, if I select that and I go back to all IDs, if you have problems with, because you've got a shell behind another shell, so you can't select it, use the IDs down here to hide all the other shells so you can select just the one you want. And I wanted to select that just so I could move it over a little bit. I'm also going to scale it down just a little bit. Okay, now let's select the one on the opposite side, which will be this one here. The reason I wanted to move it over is because I wanted to place this one beside it. Now, again, I'd say to you guys, avoid overlapping your UVs like this, particularly if you're taking this object into a painting program, a 3D paint program like Substance Painter or Mari. You don't want to be overlapping your UVs like this. But we're not going to be taking this into Mari or Substance, so we can overlap them here. But generally, try to avoid overlapping like this, particularly if you're taking it into a 3D paint program. Okay, again, let's start non-uniform scale up in one direction. Alright, and now these two are the bits on the top and the bottom here. We're going to do the same thing again. We're just going to move them into this darker coloured texture here. Again, we're overlapping, but because we're not painting in 3D, that's okay. And by all means, you could create a separate texture for this, but again, you want to avoid having too many textures assigned to one object, because it's going to increase, again, the draw calls when you get this asset into your game engine, and that's going to slow down the engine. So avoid having multiple materials assigned to an object where you can anyway. Sometimes you can't avoid it, but if you can, then it's best to try. Alright, so we have all of that assigned to that object. Pardon me. I'm just going to remove my seams here because I don't like seeing them in my viewport. Alright, now we've UV mapped that one. Let's copy our UVW map there. Select the next one. Again, I always get caught here. If you find that you can't make a selection, like see Max isn't letting me select that second object, it's because I'm still in UV edit mode. So just make sure you deselect anything, and then you can, so if you ever find you can't select something, it's generally because UVW edit is still active. Max does that. I forget all the time about that. I'm going to paste in a copy. Now, you saw me paste a copy, not an instance. Make sure it's not an instance. If you instance it and you change your UVs here, it's going to be changing them here, and we don't want to change our UVs here. So, all right, let's open up our copied UVW map. And again, we're going to make sure we select our texture in the background. We're going to select all of our UV shell. And I'm going to drag it over to the middle because it's the middle one that we're working with now. Now, all of these pieces are pretty much the same color. You probably don't need to do this. It's easy enough to do though, so you may as well, while you're UV mapping it, you may as well move it over to the correct position on your texture map. And that's really all we have to do there. Deselect it, select the next one, and paste that, unwrap it in again, open up our UV editor. And make sure we can see our texture in the background. Select all of our UVs. You notice I keep going out of this vertex edge mode into polygon mode. That's just because I like to make sure I've got everything selected, and I can see that more easily in poly mode as opposed to vertex mode. That's the reason I keep doing that. Just makes it easier for me to make sure that I've got all of my polys selected correctly. All of my UV shell parts correctly selected, I should say. Again, we're just going to shift drag that over, and again the shift just constrains it in one direction, and the only thing I have to move here is this back piece. I'm just going to move that over. Okay, and I'm going to make sure I turn off the map seams. I really don't like seeing those. I'm going to make sure I turn my map seams off here. Alright, let's work on these smaller pieces now. We'll start with this top one. We can't paste our UVs in here because we're using a different, to begin with, the mesh is actually a different size, so pasting the UVs in won't work. So we're going to throw down another unwrap UVW. Again, we're going to open our editor. I'm just going to make sure it's a little bit smaller. Now I'm going to actually save my current settings here as a default. Hopefully Max will remember this is the size I want my UV window to be. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. You have to ask Autodesk why that is, but we'll try it. So if you go into options and you save your current settings as a default, what should happen is Max, every time you add a UVW unwrap, should remember this window size instead of opening up really long on us. Okay, let's go into our texture in the background, make sure it's showing. Select all of our UVs, and again we're going to do a flatten mapping. Again, I'm going to move it all to the side. Select that front edge. We're going to rotate it 90 degrees. And we're going to uniformly scale it down at this stage. Make sure it's about where we want it to be, which is there. Again, this is the back edge, which we're never going to see, so we're going to scale that down. And we're just going to pop that in the center again like we did with the ones on the side. These are the top edges, and you can see how Max, when it did its flatten mapping here, these top edges should not be as wide as the front edge. That's not correct. So what we're going to do is we're going to non-uniformly scale it again down in one direction on both of those pieces, the top and the bottom, to better match the underlying geometry. We'll select both of them. We're going to uniformly scale them down. And again, I'm going to just move them so that they overlap the one on the front. And again, the two side pieces here on either end, they should be scaled up a little to better match the geometry again. We can scale them in, scale them back. They need to come back just a little bit more. And again, we're just going to move them so that they overlap that part of the texture as well. I'm going to deselect that, make sure I turn off my map seams and peel seams. Again, makes it easier for me to see the actual model. And because we're using the same color texture, we don't have to worry about a map seam or anything. Alright. And remember too, it's a small texture, but you're never going to be getting in this close to it in the game engine, so you're only ever going to be seeing it at a distance like that. So let's copy our unwrap UVW again. Select the next one. And do the same thing, we're going to paste it. Open our editor. And again, now this is another bug in Max. You'll notice that the window is very small, even though we saved our window size. Now that's because we're pasting a UV shell in. If we created a new one, hopefully Max would have remembered our window size, but it never does when you're pasting a copy in. It always makes it tiny like that. And again, I think that's just a bug in Max. It's always been that way back from when I first started using Max. So. Alright, let's select all of our UVs again, and we're going to do the same thing. We're just going to move it over. So the position is matching where it is on the model. Okay. We're going to select the next one down. We're going to paste our unwrap UVW in. Open our editor. Make sure we can see our texture. And again, we're just going to move that down. Okay, now I can tell here by looking at the underlying texture that what Max has done is it's flipped this UV shell that light part should be sitting at the top, not to the side, to better match the texture underneath. So I'm going to select that base and I'm going to rotate that 90 degrees. I'm going to scale it down and scale it out. And again, you can see Max has still flipped it the wrong way around. So I'm going to go into Tools and I'm going to flip it on the vertical. Now that texture better matches the underlying texture here in the actual texture map. Again, that's something just to keep an eye on with Max, because it can flip your UVs around on you. We don't have to worry about the one in the background because we're never seeing it. Again, now let's copy that corrected UV shell. And we're going to paste it onto this one. Open our UV editor again and just move our UVs across. And now we've got the final ones on the bottom to do. Again, we're going to paste our UVs. Open our editor. We'll move our UVs down. And that jumps them because I let go of the shift key. You must always remember to keep the shift key held down if you want to constrain it. The minute you let go of the shift key, it's going to start moving all over the place. I'm just going to move that one up. Making sure our UVs are the correct way around, and they are. Again, we're just going to copy that. Select the next one and paste in that copy. Again, open the UVW editor and move our UV shells up, over I should say a little. Again, I'm holding the shift key down to constrain it. Alright, let's paste here again. I don't want to put another unwrap on, I just want to open my UV editor. And again, we're going to move those ones down. And paste the final UVW unwrap on. And move our shells over just a bit to the other side, again to better match the texture that in the position it is on the model. I'm just going to have a look at these ones for a minute. I just want to check the texture underneath of it. Yeah. I actually think these will look better if we don't have that bit of the light color at the top. So I'm just going to scale all of these down a bit, just in the one direction again. And make sure that they're in the right position. I think that looks better. I didn't like that lighter color at the top there. I wanted it all to be this darker color. I'm just going to do the same thing on this one here. So again, I hold down the shift key to non-uniform scale and then just move it up a bit back into position. And that's better. I think that better matches the underlying texture. Now I don't like what it's done here on the sides. It doesn't look like it's UV mapped correctly, so I'm going to fix that up as well. I'm going to select the original rectangular box here in the background that the flat texture was applied to. Again, I'm going to do an unwrap. Open my editor. Now you see I have all of these materials. That's because that object is part of a multi-material object. That's the reason it's giving us all these options. I think we want stair. No, we don't want that one. No. This is the one we want. Okay, I'm going to turn off my map seams because you can see what it's doing in my viewport there. I can't see anything. I'm going to select these side UVs. I'm going to break them so I can move them. If I don't break them before I try and move them, I'm going to get stretching happening because they're still attached. I'm going to do that for the... actually, I'm not going to do it on the top or the bottom because the top and the bottom butt up against the railing and the footer of that railing section. So you'll never see them. I'm only going to worry about the two side pieces. Again, the same thing. I'm just going to go into tools and make sure I break it. I'm going to leave that UV mapped correctly because I want that to take up the entire texture. Alright, let's work on these two side pieces. I can select both of them at the same time and non-uniform scale them. Again, hold down the shift key. Going to move them off to the side for a moment, select one of them and move it over. And that should actually be on this side. And move this one over to the other side. And that just better matches our texture there. Actually, again, it looks to me like Max, when it's unwrapped it, has unwrapped it in the wrong direction. So I'm just going to again open up my editor. And the reason I can tell that is because I'm looking at the texture here and you see it looks like striping happening. That's telling me that it looks as if the UV shell is flipped in the wrong direction. From a distance, chances are you'd never notice it, but I know I'm seeing it here, so let's see if we can correct that. So again, I'm going to open up my UV editor. Select both of those UV shells. Let's try rotating it 90 degrees. Scaling it non-uniformly again in each direction.